welcome everyone to our first xTalk of this academic year. Thanks for coming out. So my name is Jovi Nazarino. I work as a learning science and education outreach specialist as part of the residential education team in open learning. We are here to support faculty and instructors in their teaching with technology. Today's talk is about flipping and using student feedback to improve the learning experience. And it is my pleasure to introduce our two guest speakers today. We have Olivier Weck and María Vázquez Sánchez. Oli is the Apollo Program Professor of Astronautics and Engineering Systems, as well as the Associate Department Head of AeroAstro. And María is the Student Program Administrator of MIT's Undergraduate Practice Opportunities Program, also known as UPOP. And although they work in different contexts, they both have very thoughtfully considered how they can leverage student feedback, in Oli's case, to help create a flipped classroom structure, and in both Oli and Maria's examples, how they are organizing sets of resources for easy access for students on Canvas. So the way today's talk will work is Oli will present first, then we'll have María present, and then we'll have time for some open discussion and Q&A. So all that being said, Oli, I will hand things off to you. You can share screen when you're ready.
Okay, well, first of all, I'd like to thank Jovi. I want to thank the open learning team, particularly residential education within open learning. As you guys know, probably open learning is quite the organization. So I want to acknowledge everybody, and in particular, Aaron Kessler, who's here on the call, who really helped bring this project to fruition. So Aaron, thank you for helping guide us through that process. I'm going to talk about a course called 16.851, Introduction to Satellite Engineering. It's a graduate level class, usually taken by first-year master's students, and it's an introduction into satellite systems. So you can see my background here is related to that class. So we have the Earth over here. Here we have a spacecraft called LRO, that's the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter. That's a spacecraft that's been run out of NASA Goddard, a very, very successful mission, I should say. And then over here to my right, we have Tim the Beaver on the lunar surface. So just a little bit of motivation there to begin with. So this course has been taught for many, many decades. In fact, I took this course from Professor Walt Hollister, who unfortunately has passed away. But in 1997, the course was taught very old-fashioned, handwritten notes, blackboard, chalk. The professor was covered in chalk fully after the lecture, and we furiously scribbled notes, and it was great. I loved the course, but it's now 30 years later, and how do we teach the course? So let me tell you the story. So here's a description of the course, as you will find it in the catalog. It covers the principles and governing equations. It's an introductory course for the design, launch, and operation of artificial satellites in Earth orbit and beyond. There's a lot covered in this course. It's a very content intensive. For example, we cover the famous rocket equation, the vis-viva equation. That's here. I'm trying to figure out if I can get my little pointer. Orbital maneuvers, the famous Hohmann transfer, bielliptics, the link budget equation, power, thermal equilibrium, how do spacecraft interact with the environment, aerodynamic drag, electrostatic charging, radiation. Also, how do initially spacecraft are modeled very simply as a point mass, and then we model them as a rigid body subject to Euler's equations of rotational motion. And this course is really a kind of a prerequisite for more advanced topics in satellite engineering. All right, so that's a mouthful, and I'll try to be a little bit more specific as to how it was structured and why we flipped the classroom and how we used Canvas and the MITx platform jointly. So one of the reasons that we did this project was that over the years, we had noticed that the population of students taking this course, the subject, had really become a lot more diverse. So this is from 2 prior years, 2019 and 2020. Course 16, the blue wedge is AeroAstro. That's kind of as expected. But I would say 20 years ago, it would have been all blue, all AeroAstro. But now we have course 15. What is course 15? Does anybody know? What is course 15?
Management.
Management. We have Sloan students actually coming over from the eastern part of campus to the western part of campus to learn about satellite design. Very exciting, but also challenging because not all of them have the technical background. But they want to learn ASP, that's our advanced study program. TPP, our technology and planning program. 12, that's Earth and Planetary Sciences. NIH, those are the Harvard cross registrations. Anyway, and then course 6, of course, and course 8, physics and EECS. So the challenge for us was these are really excited students, but it's a very non-homogeneous background. How do we allow these students an entry point to learn about satellites that helps, everybody get to sort of a similar level, but not be kind of too technical or too challenging or even boring, quite frankly, for the non-course 16 students. The course that we're talking about here is boxed in red on the left side, 16851, Introduction to Satellite Engineering. One of the changes we made is to go from a 12-unit to a 6-unit class. So it's a half-semester class during H1, and then it becomes the jumping-off point for like a spacecraft laboratory course, advanced satellite engineering, and then the more detailed topics like space communications, attitude control, astrodynamics, propulsion, and then eventually on the right side, we find mission design. So that's a little bit on the positioning of the course. One of the key topics, and again, Aaron was very helpful in working with us on this, is to modularize, to decompose the content of the course in a way that's logical, that's accessible. So the way we did this is, you see the Earth here in the center, and like think of this as the hours on a clock, right? So you start at noon or at 1 o'clock, I should say. You have to learn about the atmosphere, Earth's atmosphere. To get to space, you have to go through Earth's atmosphere into the space environment, then launch and the rocket equation. Then we are now in orbit. So now we can learn about orbits and perturbations like, drag, solar radiation pressure, J2, which is due to the oblateness of the Earth, and so forth. Maneuvers and trajectories, power and energy management. If you don't have solar panels or maybe even a nuclear reactor on your satellite, you can't function. You don't have power. Mostly it's solar power, so don't worry too much. Then we have attitude determination and control, remote sensing and payload. So for example, taking images of the Earth, taking measurements. 8 is command and data handling. 9 is communicating with the ground, so sending telemetry, health information, scientific data, and then uplinking of commands to a spacecraft. 10 is thermal engineering and control. This is why we're close to the sun here. A spacecraft is either too hot or it's too cold when it's on the shaded side of the Earth, so you have to deal with that. And then 11 is structures and mass properties. And finally, 12 is basically system engineering, mission design, and cost estimation. So a lot. And then we took these 12 modules and we broke each of them down into 3 submodules or topic areas. So we ended up with 36 topics. This project was initiated actually in 2021. And we submitted what's called an express grant application to the MITx. I guess you guys have changed the name slightly. Right now it's Open Learning Residential, but MITx Residential Development. We were selected for that grant. And then it took a couple of years. We were just delayed a little bit, but we eventually got student feedback. So we did this first part. We're still thinking about a MOOC and really rolling this out. But we are now permanently in this new flipped classroom mode. All right, so I'm going to show you briefly Canvas and what it looks like, but this is what a typical module looks like in Canvas. So module 1-1, module 1-2, module 1-3. So for each of the modules, we have a lecture video. The videos are typically 10 to 20 minutes long. We really wanted to get it down to like 5 minutes or 7 minutes, but it's extremely challenging. And so we recorded those videos on Zoom. They were not like highly produced, but making short videos is very challenging. Even getting down to 10 to 20 minutes is really challenging. Then we have the lecture notes and slides. And then one of the big things we achieved in this project was to create a link, an explicit link between Canvas and MITx, the MITx platform. And we called that MITx Interactive Content. And I'll show you what that looks like. And then we also included guideposts, since the students are like self-guided here, to once they complete these elements, to automatically continue on to the next module. And so that's typically what a structure looked like. And then once you dive into these modules, you have videos. What was really cool in this project, we also had some funding from JPL under a SERP contract. And so JPL provided us with 36 videos that actually matched the topics that we had in the different topics. And I'll show you one of those videos. A lot of those people in the video are actually alums who were at MIT before or who took the course and are using these concepts for actual missions, for example, at JPL. We also had multiple choice concept questions. So here's an example of a question. What is the significance of using tools like AP8 or AE8 models in radiation modeling for satellite missions? There's 4 potential answers. Only one of them is correct. And then this would be auto-graded, which you can't do in Canvas directly, but you can do auto-grading in MITx, in the MITx platform. And then linking of, this was technically challenging, and maybe Aaron can explain a bit more in the background what had to be done, but I'm really happy we got this accomplished, is automatically importing the answers from the concept questions from the MITx platform into the Canvas gradebook. So if you look here, we gave points for the end of class survey. This is attendance, the attendance record. And then here, these points, 1 or 0, are automatically generated in the gradebook in Canvas from the MITx platform. This is Canvas for this course. This was last year, 2024. And then here you can see the module structure. So there's a lot of material here. So we have 36 topics. And so the last module is on costing, life cycle cost analysis for space missions. And that's module 12-3. Now, if we go into an individual module, and you can basically click, you have your lecture video, you have your slides, and then if we click on this, we get transported to the MITx page. So it looks like it's native to Canvas, but you're actually talking to the MITx platform in the background. And, you can play the video. I'm not sure if the sound comes through here, but so you can see this is a JPL provided video. We coordinated with them.
Good morning. My name is María de Soria.
And Maria is standing here at JPL. We have Jupiter. We have a spacecraft.
Yes,
and she's explaining why this is an important topic. And this video is pretty short. It's only like a minute and 10. So easy to read, very motivational. And then we go to Then we go to these concept questions. So the first one was correct. The second one here, I kind of did on purpose, incorrect. So 0 points. And then the third concept question was also correct. So this would be 2 points out of 3 would be awarded for this, and then they would be submitted to the gradebook on Canvas. All right, so back to the slides. So how did it go? Well, we got good student feedback, but we learned a lot. It was mixed. It was perhaps not as big a success as we had hoped. The flipped part was, but the non-flipped part was the issue. So positive feedback. I liked the flipped classroom style, and I think it worked well given the sheer amount of content that the class had to cover, which, as you saw, is a lot. The flipped classroom format did ensure that we all learned the material. The online lectures were great when the content wasn't repeated the next day in the in-person section. This is a key comment here. I'm going to say more about it. I thought the flipped classroom was very effective for my comprehension of material. It requires more work outside of the classroom, but I was more engaged in class discussions because I had already familiarized myself with the material. This is kind of this last comment. That's exactly what we were going for. However, not everybody agreed. So here's a student that says, I did not enjoy the flipped classroom. It was not conducive to my learning. I, all caps, strongly prefer the traditional classroom teaching style. The flipped classroom format was a bit challenging for me. Loved the class, super interesting, but a lot of work. The flipped classroom just took a lot of time. Some weeks were brutal. Since the videos were super long, the material was always great, but the work outside of class just took a very long time. Also, since the P-sets, which we were still doing P-sets, were pretty long. So so the score that we got for this class was a 5.8 out of 7. I should say that the year before we got a 6.4 out of 7. So that was a bit of a letdown. However, in the prior years to that, the course had scored more like 5.2, 5.4. So the 5.8 was actually, if you averaged it over the last decade or so, the 5.8 is actually an improvement. So what did we learn? I think this student here gave us, since today is also about student feedback, this student really kind of brought it to a point. I think that the inverted classroom was a well-intentioned idea, but I found that the online lecture followed by in-class recitation that repeated the online lecture felt like I was not getting a lot of value out of my time in class. Once we started, and we kind of realized it halfway through, once we started doing in-class exercises that mirrored the P-sets, it was a much more effective use of our time. So, so the learning here is that learning technology, Canvas, MITx platform, videos, all of that is great, but the students really, really crave still the human contact. When you flip a classroom, you should pay close attention to the quote non-flipped part, which is what do you do during the live sessions? Sorry, there's a little typo here. What to do in the live sessions, and well, we can fix that. And then don't duplicate what's online when you talk with the students. And we thought, well, duplication is good, right? You want to reinforce the material, but the reality is that this generation of students, they're so good at absorbing a lot of information that you don't want to repeat it. You want to do something else. You want to do something interactive, something surprising, something challenging, something that they haven't already seen in the flipped format. And then I'll just say MIT Open Learning is an amazing team. And this is just, the cover, the web page here for MIT Open Learning. It was a pleasure to work with the team. They do have some resources, limited resources financially, but they actually paid for partial TA over the summer. We had MIT class funds. We had this Express grant, and then we had the JPL SERP. So to pull this off, we actually pulled together funding from 3 different sources. Each individually wasn't that much money, but once we put it together, it was substantial. And so in some sense, I'm highlighting here, we kind of worked on connecting all 3 areas: Canvas, residential MITx, and then also captured videos into a coherent approach.
Thank you, Ollie. That was really great. Really appreciate that presentation. Before we head into discussion, I'm going to actually hand things off to Maria. That will kind of get another use case example. I will open up for discussion right after that.
So I'll be talking to you about how we use student feedback to improve the UPOP Canvas experience. So UPOP is the Undergraduate Practice Opportunities Program here at MIT. And since I'm used to giving an agenda in class, I'll give an agenda here. So I'll tell you a little bit more about what UPOP is, why Canvas matters to us. And I'll talk a little bit about, what we saw as opportunities for improvement and how we gathered feedback, as well as some of our key findings and the design decisions we ultimately made. And I'll get a chance to show you the new Canvas structure that we're actually using this semester, as well as going over some lessons and next steps. So UPOP is a year-long program for MIT sophomores, and what we focus on is helping sophomores build the relevant critical skills they need for a career in industry, research, or academia. So we are an elective class at MIT. We are only 3 units, so 1 unit per semester. And we really take our sophomores through the journey of, what is a career? How do you look into career pathways? How do I look for a job like an internship or a research opportunity? And so the fall semester, we really start with that part. So looking into career pathways, resumes, cover letters, interviewing, networking. And because we are a low unit course, so we're only 1 unit per semester, we only have 6 required classes and 5 required assignments. That being said, we only meet every other week, so we do not have a consistent class schedule like some of their other MIT classes. And then in the IAP semester, which is the winter period, we have a 3.5-day team training workshop where students really get to hone in on those, sometimes we call them those soft skills that they need, right? So like problem solving, teamwork, communication. And then in the spring, we shift our focus to helping students feel ready to enter a professional work environment. So we teach them about project management basics, communication in the workplace, giving and receiving feedback. And so in the spring, we have 4 required classes and 5 required assignments. Okay. And Canvas is really important to our students because Canvas is really that central place where they look for, when is class going to happen? Where is it going to happen? Like I mentioned, we don't have a consistent schedule. And so students need to know, this week I have class, this week I don't have class. And we also have all our assignment instructions and submissions on Canvas as well. So we will ask them to submit a resume so that we can review it. And that is what they'll do. They'll do that through Canvas as well. And Canvas is also where we house all of our career resources. So we have a lot of documents that give tips for like resume writing tips, cover letter writing tips, networking tips, anything related to the job process. We have all those resources located on Canvas. And we also post about our exclusive optional events on Canvas as well. And that being said, we do have email that we use, and our communications coordinator handles all our email communication to students, and most of the things that are on Canvas will also be emailed to them. But it is important to keep in mind that students receive hundreds of emails, and it's not rare for a student to block an email that they're getting. So we really want Canvas to be that central place for students to go. And so to give a little context, when I started in my role in August 2024, and so did my colleague, Tori DeRoche. So we're both student program administrators. We really handle kind of the student side of the program with the classes and Canvas. And so we inherited this site in August of 2024 and immediately were able to connect with residential education. I know I met with Lauren to talk about best practices and tips and tricks and what could be unique about MIT Canvas, and that was really helpful. And what's important to note is that our Canvas site was relatively new, so our program has changed a lot over the last couple of years. if you can see on my presentation template, we are actually in our 25th year. So we're celebrating our 25th year of UPOP this year. And it's only recently that we've started having fall and spring semester courses. And so it's only recently that we've gotten a Canvas site. And so we really saw an opportunity to streamline and modernize our Canvas page because it was so new, and we knew that it had to be a central location for students. And so in the fall semester, kind of in September through November, we were able to request the Canvas sandbox site. And so this is like an empty Canvas site that you can use to play around with formatting and layouts. And what we did was we kind of copied over our original site. So we weren't going to start from scratch. We already had a really strong foundation that was built. And we decided to prototype 2 different layouts. So one layout that we were trying out was the orientation layout. And so the orientation layout, what it would do, it would take you to something that looked like this. So it would take you to a page that had the description of what orientation was going to be like, any resources that you needed, any assignments that you needed. And this is something that we found through the resources provided through open learning. And so this was an interesting concept, so we wanted to play around with it. And the other layout that we were testing was also what we'll call the goal setting layout. So if students clicked on goal setting, then it would take them directly to the module section. So if they were to click on goal setting, they would then be led to the modules page, which will show when is the goal setting class, what are any assignments or resources related to it. So this was something that we had in the sandbox. And so this wasn't accessible to students at the time. Students were still using the site from the previous years. And what we did was in the fall semester of 2024, we have 6 course assistants that work with our office. And course assistants are like teaching assistants. They are juniors or seniors. Most of them have gone through our program before, and they really help us out with class and office tasks. And so we had 6 of our course assistants review and give feedback on these layout options. And I just want to show like the prompt that we gave our course assistants. So this is the verbatim prompt that we gave our course assistants. So we told them we're going to be working on improving the Canvas site. And what was really important about this prompt is that at the bottom, I asked for them to think about their current or their past classes and to think about Canvas sites that they've really loved. And I know students probably don't love Canvas sites, but what I meant was really just a Canvas site that's easy for them to use, that it's really easy for them to find assignments. And I asked them to send any screenshot that they had if they had access to it as well. And they were also asked to compare the 2 different layout options. And so from this prompt, some of the feedback that we got, I just wanted to highlight 3 different quotes from students. So one of our students said, "One thing I noticed a lot of my classes would do is instead of having the breakdowns and information under modules, they move that to be on the homepage." Another student said, "Personally, I prefer referring to one document or page rather than navigating through multiple clicks on Canvas." And another student said, "Having a dedicated assignments section would make it clear when tasks and participations are due. This gives students a single place to check due dates and stay on top of their responsibilities. It would be helpful because usually all the classes have this and students will be familiar with it." So this is really great feedback from our course assistants because, as I mentioned, we were new to our roles. And so we didn't really have a lot of context for what are students used to seeing on Canvas at MIT, what are some of their other classes like. And a lot of our course assistants were really reiterating that fact of they want fewer clicks. So they want to be able to just directly access their assignments, directly access resources. And while we did get compliments on the orientation layout, that it was like very pretty and the tabs were cool, but it just wasn't as direct as just putting the information right on there. So what we found was that they all really wanted a centralized assignment tab. And in our old site, we did not have a centralized assignments tab. And they really all mentioned that the homepage should really show all the upcoming events and key information, so room numbers, hours. Based on this feedback that we got in the fall, we were able to make some changes for the spring of 2025. So for the spring of 2025, we really just remodeled the homepage to have everything present in the front. So all their resources are on the top, and all the dates of the classes and assignments were also listed right on the homepage. So this was a small change that we were able to do from semester to semester. As a program, we are very busy. between the months of January and March running our team training workshops. So there wasn't a lot of big changes that we could do throughout the year, but this is one of the initial changes that we made between semesters. What actually ended up happening is that we were able to gather even more feedback in the spring semester. So in May 2025, we asked the MIT Teaching and Learning Lab to do a focus group on overall learning in our program. So they had a group of about 30 students and asked them about what helps your learning in this course. Are there any barriers to your learning? Do you have any suggestions that would improve your learning? Any advice for future students? And so Canvas was not the main topic of this conversation, but it did come up frequently, as we saw in the focus group results, that students were having issues navigating the Canvas site, or that they were confused about when classes were, or confused about whether classes were required or not, or confused about whether an assignment was due or not. And so this focus group, even though it wasn't for Canvas, really reinforced some of that course assistant feedback that we had gotten in the fall and helped to guide our final design. And when we were making design decisions, our number one priority was the homepage. So making sure all our dates are listed on there clearly, all our resources right when a student opens up the homepage. The other thing we decided to do was have chronological order in the modules tab. So making sure that the classes and the assignments were listed chronologically in the modules tab. This is something that came from some of the course assistant feedback, that they liked having that chronological order so that they knew when things were due. And definitely the assignments tab was essential, making sure that that was all there in one place. And so really just having multiple places where all that information is there in one place. Because students are used to different things on different classes. So some classes only use assignment tabs, some classes only use the modules, some classes will use the homepage, but they're used to seeing everything on whichever one they choose. And we also decided to reorganize some of our resources. So because we have a lot of career readiness resources, we decided to organize them by action. And I just want to point out that it was really helpful throughout this process, collaborating with residential education. Lauren was really helpful in giving us a lot of resources and insights and sharing other Canvas sites from professors, letting us know what's available on the Canvas Commons. So it was really important for us to collaborate with residential education. We're really grateful for all our help we got from Lauren. And I just want to give you a tour of the Canvas site that we are using now. So this is what it looks like after we've made all the edits. So if you see the Canvas site, a student will open up and they are directly on the homepage. They can see this week was actually our first week of classes. So they see an announcement that we have class this week and they see everything that's required. So we made it very explicit. These are our 6 required classes. These are our 5 required assignments. And we have all the resources listed up here. So as a program, we have mentors who we work with, and we have employers that we work with. And so just to give you an example of what happens if they clicked on a course, so they'd open it up and we have orientation this week. They would click on this and it would actually take them to the modules page. And so since we've already had some classes of orientation, we've uploaded. Oh no, we have not opened it yet because we have not had all the classes. So once we have all of our orientation sections, we'll upload the slides from that class. And we really upload any extra resources that are related to each class on here. Right? And so we already have some ready for milestone 1, some resources that will be relevant after we have the class. And right here on the home page, you can go to our resources. So our resources are now organized by action. So resumes, cover letters, some application sets, networking. And so students can click through based on what they're looking for. And I want to point out the assignments tab. So this is something that a lot of our course assistants mentioned, is that a lot of classes use the assignments tab. So now if a student were to click on the assignments tab for our course, they'll see, okay, I get graded on attendance and I get graded on these 5 assignments. And so it's very clear in a lot of areas of the page what is due for them and what's required. So some early signs that we've seen that are really helpful for us and are really motivating is that we've been using the course analytics to track how students have been engaging with the website. And so compared to this time last year, we have a significant increase in student engagement on Canvas overall, which is great to see. And we have a significant increase in accessing resources. So, already this was a screenshot taken, I think, a week and a half ago. So before we even had our classes started, we already had 38 students visit the resources page, which is something we didn't have in the past. And so it's great to see that students are clicking through and exploring our resources. And just some lessons learned throughout this process is one of the things is, show it, don't just tell it. So the sandbox site was really helpful in making feedback concrete. It was also a space where we could experiment with the class site without messing with the actual class site. So it was very helpful for us. And I would say don't be afraid to switch something for the next term based on new input. So as instructors, as faculty, you've been very busy throughout the semester. So you might not have time to do a whole revamp. We certainly did not have time to do a whole revamp during the academic year, but it was really helpful to just make one tweak between semesters to see how that worked out and see how we could improve it later on. And the other thing we noticed is that simplicity and repetition definitely beats out any fancy graphics or clever layouts. So while I loved the orientation layout because it was pretty, it had a lot of colors, it looked like it would be really useful, students want something simple. They want as little clicks as possible. And sometimes I think the repetition is important because they might be used to accessing resources in a different way. So their other classes might have everything listed under assignments. So it's important that we also have that as well, so that they don't have to figure out, how should I find everything for this class? And I think the most important thing that we learned is that the homepage should really answer one question, which is, what should I do now? Students have a lot of classes, they're really overwhelmed, they have so many P-sets, and we are an elective course, so we really want to pride ourselves on being low time commitment, being easy to access. And so for us, that was the most important thing, is we want a student to open up the Canvas page and know exactly what they have to do next. And some things that we'll monitor next, we'll definitely keep looking at the course analytics to see how many students are using and accessing our resources and which resources they're accessing. So that's a great thing to monitor. And we also have new course assistants this year, so we will definitely be asking our course assistants this year for some feedback on Canvas as well. And we'll also monitor the feedback from the focus group in the spring of 2026. So to see if we have any insight on, was it easier to navigate? Are students mentioning Canvas at all in the focus group? That will be great to see. And I just want to give a timeline because, these things don't happen one day to the next. So this process really took us about a year, and we weren't working on it the entire time. So in August, we inherited the Canvas site and were able to connect with residential education. Throughout the fall semester of 2024, we requested the sandbox site. We were able to build some examples, and we were able to collect course system feedback. Then we had a little bit of a lull between January and February because, again, that's a very busy time for our office. So it's not a lot of time to dedicate just to Canvas. And then in March and May, we really didn't work on Canvas that much at all. We just implemented like a new homepage, and then there was the TLL focus group. But it was really not until June, July, and August of this year that we were able to dedicate more time, outside of the academic year. Our summers are more focused on strategic planning, so we had a little more time to dedicate to Canvas, and we were able to launch this site for September. So this week, like I mentioned, was our first week of classes, so we were able to launch the site for our students for this semester. So I just want to say thank you, and thank you to Lauren and the residential education team. It was very helpful, all the resources you guys provided. And so I would say to anyone at MIT, definitely use this resource. It's very valuable. But thank you.
That was amazing. Thank you so much, Maria, for your presentation. Two things I noticed both of you folks talk about. One that I think is very important to acknowledge. First is that, you both kind of noticed at some point the need to modernize or make some updates to the course and the course sites. So thank you both for taking that time and effort to actually work towards that. As you both have shown, it takes some time and iteration, and being willing to make changes, sort of over time as you learn is so important. I also noticed that both of you are kind of gathering up things through multiple sources, right? So whether it's like leveraging in from Ollie or kind of pulling from multiple grants to help do things, right? I think you mentioned MITx grant, and I think you said JPL grant. And you also worked on the Canvas Innovation Fund, which is through my team, Residential Education. And Maria, you worked with the Teaching and Learning Lab, TLL, as well to help gather that student feedback in addition to some advice that you maybe got from Lauren. So really cool to kind of hear how those things kind of came together in your context. I'm happy to open up for questions. If anyone has something on their mind, now's your chance to unmute and speak up or type in the chat.
That's a great question. And in retrospect, that is the central question, I think, for making flipped classroom. The whole purpose of flipping the classroom is to make sure you free up the face-to-face time to be interactive with the students. And the students really love that. In some sense, the recitation, the lecture time becomes recitation time. And the best thing you can do is solve problems with the students, like on the board or interactively, active learning. So you come into the classroom, they're sitting there or standing there, and you throw them a challenge. And there's a couple ways to do it. Like one of my colleagues showed me, like he teaches in a room that has all whiteboards around the perimeter. And so there's a projector and said, we're going to work on this problem now. And so in your case, Daniel, you could have a data set, right? There's a data set, and then you put it there and said, you guys get that data set, and now I want to answer this question. And it takes time. It's slow, like, okay, load the data and then calculate the mean and the standard deviation or whatever it is. And then you go around the room and work with each group of students to progress and then stop and have a discussion. And so it's actually way, way more challenging to do it that way than give a traditional lecture. Traditional lecture, you stand in front of the room, you have your notes or you have your slides, whatever, and you just regurgitate the material and they sit there and listen to you. And of course, you can sprinkle in, like concept questions, but by and large, it's a very predictable evolution of what happens during a traditional lecture. During these interactive recitations in a flipped classroom, a lot of different things could happen, and it's very unsettling initially as an instructor, as a professor, to deal with that. But it's fun. It's actually a lot of fun. Everybody has more fun, gets more out of it, but it's more unpredictable what will come. And it actually requires way more preparation than a traditional lecture. So in some sense, the flipped classroom is more work all around because you got to load the lectures, the videos, everything has to be preloaded online. And then you have to make sure that the in-person sessions are engaging. So it's a ton of work. But if it's done well, the learning is amazing. The learning is just amazing.
I'll add one thing because I think it's a great question. Like the question you just asked is really a key one. And it wasn't something that Ollie touched on, but I think it's really important that he and his team had done a lot of work on prior to sort of our engagement, which was thinking about the actual sort of learning goals and objectives for each of those modules and submodules. He was very clear about, this is what I want my students to know and be able to do when they're done with that submodule. And so that then allowed him to think really, okay, well, what is the activity that might go with that in the class? What is the challenge question that I might be able to ask to get them to show me or show themselves or show others in the class that they understand this thing that we covered in this lecture that was pre-recorded? And so I just wanted to sort of say, like, there's a little bit of work that can go into thinking about that through line that can help with thinking about what then is open to you, what is available, what type of data exploration might you want to do, or what type of manipulations, or what type of structured or unstructured cleaning might you want to engage in that sort of gets at some of the core principles or ideas that you might be trying to cover in the course as a whole. So I'm always happy to have further conversations about that, but I just wanted to sort of note the really hard work that sort of Ollie and his team had done about some of that work ahead of time.
So in 16851 in the satellite engineering course, there are 0 groups. There are no groups for nothing. So it's all individual learning. That's one, if you then do flipped classroom and groups, and teams and all of that, that's really complex. So No, 851 is an individual learner class, and then there's a follow-on course, 853, excuse me, Advanced Satellite Engineering, where we do use groups, a more traditional lecture format, and they basically get to pick one mission that they're interested in, like the one shown here, LRO, and they deep dive into that mission. And then they produce a report and a 5-minute video about that mission. And then the last class is we do the viewing celebration of all these videos. But that's the follow-on to this course.
One other thing maybe to consider too is that if you're just thinking about trying a flipped classroom model, experimenting with maybe certain weeks or certain sets of content where you think it makes the most sense to do that with as a trial run is also a different way to go about it, and to really think through how it went and how it didn't go well, and kind of make the improvements and apply to other spots in the class as sort of over time.
Yeah, I think that for our program, I think the Canvas site is hopefully steady right now, but we're definitely open to changing it. We've had also a lot of conversations about, would it be possible for us to do a flipped classroom? Right now, we only have 50-minute classes every other week, so we don't really have that much time to play around with. But definitely, if we do decide in the future to move towards a flipped classroom, it would have to look a lot different. So we're open to any improvements and any feedback that students get, but for now, we're really hoping that this Canvas site is just as easy to navigate as possible and as similar to any of their other classes, so that it's not confusing for students and it just feels like another class that they can click through.
Just a comment. I thought it was Maria, some of your comments on their last set of slides around what students really appreciate, just to call out students like to know what they need and what they need to do very quickly. Anything we can do to help them figure that out and spend their time on the actual things that you really value more so than their time spent navigating and finding things is I'm sure much appreciated. So
yeah,
just wanted to bring that back up.
We spent a lot of time last year getting asked, oh, where can I find this on Canvas? Where can I find this? And so that's one of the reasons we realized we do need to change things around, because we don't want them spending 10 minutes trying to look for something and then just giving up when we have a lot of resources available to them.
All right.
I agree with Maria. I think this generation of students is, I think, a bit different from the students we had at MIT a decade ago or 2 decades ago. If you watch them, they're amazing in terms of their absorptive capability for information. They're they're on their phones, they're on their headphones, they're on their laptops, they're on their iPhones. They're on ChatGPT, they're multitasking every minute of the day almost. And we're not going to change that. That's just who they are and how they're going to be working and learning. So it's multi-channel. So, but then they need to focus. To learn well, you do have to focus for a while on one thing and really look at that one thing. And so Maria's focus on, the homepage and what do I need to do now? And instead of doing it in 3 hours, I want to do it in 12 minutes. That's the new world that we live in. And so, and since it's all digital, the human time post-COVID is so valuable to all of us, right? So attention focusing, uplifting, the human face-to-face time, those are the big challenges.
Well, I see that we are just about at time. So just want to say thank you very much again to Ollie and Maria for your time in presenting to all of us here. And I hope to see some of you all again at a next xTalk. Thanks all.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.